to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Well, hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing, the podcast where we explore the intersection of faith and veterinary medicine. My name is Dr. Barry Schwenk. I'm a veterinarian and a pastor and your host. And today I have a special treat for you. If this is, I think it's a special treat. This is oftentimes when we talk about missions, we think about having to give up 10 years of your life, flying 50,000 miles away, although I guess 50,000 miles would be right back where you started. I guess I probably didn't think about that too much, but the idea of missions oftentimes conjures up this idea that you have to give up everything, take all of this time away from family and even from career progression, but that's not always the case. And today I'm joined by Dr. Ginger Pelc, and she's going to share a little bit with us about her experiences with short-term missions. And hopefully, as you're listening to her, you might see that missions is not nearly as scary or as far away as what you might think. So, Ginger, it's great to have you. I appreciate you joining me after a hard day of work. And did you get the dogs all walked?
We did get the dogs all walked. Yes.
I forgot to ask you earlier. I'm like, it would be bad if they were just kind of sitting there waiting with crossed legs hoping to get there. So that's a bad thing. So I appreciate you joining me. You are fresh back from a short-term mission trip to the Navajo. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
And I think for a lot of people that may be listening as they think about missions, short-term missions is not something that they may be aware of or even really talked about. And so I was really excited that you were willing to share some time with me. When was the first time that you went on a short-term mission, and where was it? How much time is considered short, and how did that impact you?
Yeah, so my first short-term missions trip with CVM was my going into my second year of veterinary school. I had done short-term trips with my church through middle school and high school, but it was just a fantastic opportunity to be able to combine two passions that I love, so veterinary medicine and sharing the gospel. And the length of the trips are all different. So the Navajo trip is about 2 weeks, the ones that the NC State group takes. We also visit the Cherokee Reservation in the North Carolina mountains, and that's just a weekend. It's like a Thursday through a Sunday. And then also I've done trips to Alaska, to the Yupik people, and that trip is a week.
So where are you located right now?
I'm just south of Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's right. I thought you were over in that direction. So probably when you make the trek down to Arizona or to Alaska, it does require a little bit more time in order to make the trip. So on these, when we're thinking about trips, especially especially so close to where a lot of folks may live, what was your impression after going on that first trip? How did it impact you being able to, what were you able to do, and how did that kind of give you, maybe set up a platform for continuing to do this in the future?
Mm-hmm. So being able to do veterinary missions, really had a huge impact on me. Through my church, I had done stuff that was predominantly construction, VBS, those types of things, which are all things that I enjoyed. But to really combine a gift that God has given me, and to be able to use that to spread the gospel, it really was life-changing. Just having the opportunity to use those gifts and to provide services that are very much needed in those different parts of the country where people may not have good access to the veterinary care. And animals just create a fantastic bridge with people and relationships. You're sitting there waiting for a dog to wake up, and you're sitting there for 30 minutes and you're sitting with somebody that you don't know. And it's a fantastic 30 minutes to just sit there and talk with them and learn about them and their life and their trouble and their hardships, and just find out ways that you can be praying for them and support them. It's just a fantastic opportunity to be able to put the two together.
Anesthesia recovery for Jesus. That's kind of a nice.
Absolutely. It's the best spot.
That's right. I used to pray a lot through surgery, and so I didn't really think about recovery in that way. It's probably a good opportunity. So when you, how often have you been back then or how often do you go on these types of trips?
Yeah, so the Navajo trip, we go every summer. We only missed 1 year with COVID with that one. The Cherokee trip, there's actually two of them that happen, one in May and one in June. The one in June is new within the past couple of years. So I've done one of those most every year since school. That one's kind of coming on is depending on how many people they need on the trips. And then the Alaska trip, we put that with the NC State student spring and fall breaks. So that one has been twice a year since I was a student until we hit COVID. And then we had 2 or 3 years that we didn't go just because of their minimal access to healthcare, just not wanting to bring anything into the villages. But this past March was the first time we'd been back since COVID.
Yeah, but above all, do no harm, right? So even helping can be harmful if we're not careful. So on these teams, to these different reservations, what size teams are we talking about? Are these all veterinarians? Are they all veterinary students? What kind of composition do you have?
So it's honestly a huge mix. We like to take as many students as we possibly can. The Navajo trip is completely defined by the 2 15-passenger vans and how many people and stuff we can fit in them. So max I think we've had on a trip has been 22 people. For the Alaska trip, that one is kind of defined by the seats on the plane, the bush plane for where we can go. So that one is usually somewhere between 9 to 11 people. And then the Cherokee trips, those are kind of open-ended because everybody travels into the location. We want to have enough people to, be able to sit and talk with people while we perform veterinary medicine, but we have to be careful about having too many people, stepping on each other and those types of things. We want everybody to feel useful and used. So
There can be too many cooks in the kitchen or too many vets around the treatment table. I guess can be a problem too. Well, that brings up a good question. And so, and I imagine this is a little bit location specific, but on these trips, what types of things are you engaging with? How are you connecting with the community? What types of services are you providing, and how does all that kind of fit together?
So Navajo is our one main trip where we get an opportunity to do a lot of large animal on top of the small animal. The small animal is spays and neuters with vaccines. If there's something sick that comes in, we'll definitely see it and care for it for, the supplies that we have with us. But on Navajo, we are able to vaccinate a whole bunch of sheep and goats. I think we did, 1,500 sheep and goat this past trip. As well as cattle and there's a lot of horses just because the Navajo, their livelihood really is dependent on their livestock and on their horses to help care for those livestock as well. So that really presents a unique opportunity, particularly for someone like me who enjoys doing the large animal side of things. Cherokee is predominantly dog and cat, but we do also have some people that will bring horses by as well, and we'll float teeth and vaccinate, and that's a lot of what we do on the Navajo reservation for them as well. And then Alaska is predominantly dogs. If we get a rare cat, it sits in some teacher's house that they brought up from the lower 48 states. It's rare that we find one up there. So predominantly dogs. And we actually tailor that trip a little bit more towards public education because there's a big issue with rabies coming in from the foxes into the loose dog population that then has access to the people. So we spend time in the schools talking dog bite and rabies prevention with the kids as well.
So how does that actually happen? I mean, you don't just show up in a place and you have like a pop-up clinic, or what kind of connections do you have, and why veterinary medicine, and who is it that is helping to facilitate all these things?
Yeah, so each trip is a little bit different. So when we can, we try to pair with a local church. That's our goal, because we want to be able to point the people to a church because we're only there for a short time. And so the discipleship then happens after we're gone. So in Navajo, we work with the Kanta Bible Church, the Tuba City Discipleship Center. When we go up to Navajo Mountain, we don't have a super good contact up there with the church, but we've been working with a family up there for years. That's very prevalent in the community. Cherokee, the one in June, we pair with Grace Community Church, and then the Cherokee in May, we pair with the Master's Mission, which is actually a long-term mission sending agency. So those trips, as much as we can, we try to pair up with a local church. Alaska, that's a lot harder. Each village is teeny tiny. Sometimes we don't know which village we're going to end up in until our plane lands, just depending on weather. So our contacts there usually are more within the community, but anytime we have the opportunity to get in contact with somebody in the local church in one of those villages, we take every opportunity that we can to do that. But otherwise, we've got a contact in Alaska that has been in and out of these villages multiple times, providing these services. She uses Christian Veterinary Mission as well as other veterinarians. So she kind of has the contacts, and will call people and say, hey, the group's coming, and they'll put us up wherever. Sometimes it's jail cells, sometimes it's schools, sometimes it's an abandoned building. So it all depends on whatever they have for us.
Wherever you can fit in. That's all. That's probably the way that it works. Well, and it sounds like you've been CVM, as well as you personally have been connecting in these communities for a long time. What's kind of the long-term vision for some of these trips?
Yeah, so the long-term vision is the spread of the gospel, and to also, our goal is to improve the quality of the life of the animals, and for them in turn to see how much value they have in their own lives. Because in some communities, some of that is a struggle, particularly up in Alaska, is that there are high suicide rates up there, but not as high as in Navajo. But still, it's trying to instill value, even more value in the people and the kids, and how we instill value in their animals and the importance of caring for them.
It's funny how, and I think I've talked, not just on this podcast, but even outside, how much easier it is to make those interpersonal connections when you have an animal in between you, because there's that mutual point. I think I've mentioned on a few times, I think, like, I always have to think twice when someone asks me on an airplane what I do for a living, because I don't know if I want to connect at that point in time or not. But it's a great way. It is a great way to open up a conversation, to be a part of somebody's life. And there's a certain amount of trust that goes on back and forth there. How have you seen opportunities develop over all these years of going back?
So particularly with the Navajo trip, because that's the one where we've been going the longest period of time. And you'd have to ask Dr. Wages, but I think she's been going 23 or 24 years out there.
She's not that old.
Say that again.
She's not that old. We don't have to be careful about saying stuff like that. Sorry.
But that's a trip that for the first 10 15 years, at the very beginning, they didn't even trust them to do veterinary medicine, and so it was just spending time and building relationships with people and getting to know them. And even on Navajo Mountain, there's even a medicine man that lives there, and so that with that comes the native Navajo religion, and so just slowly showing love and trust, and we're there to help. And so over the years now, I mean, people will sometimes come and grab us just because they want prayer, not because they have an animal that needs anything, but they just come in to say hi, and that they've been looking forward to prayer all year for them and for their family. So it is one of those things where when I came into Navajo, we're halfway through all those years, maybe a little bit on the other side of that. And just to hear the stories of where it came from, and just to see how God's been working since then, and just being a part of that's really cool.
Well, and it sounds like over the years, like you've had various roles as well. And so that first time out as a vet student, and now continuing to go back over and over again, and then eventually as a veterinarian, and then not just as a participant, but someone who is training. It sounds like there's, from an organizational standpoint, there's a commitment to continue to connect, but also room for folks to connect on different levels. Do you find now that as a short-term team leader that it's as much about pouring into a local community as it is to maybe mentoring those that are engaging with missions for the first time, or maybe trying to figure out how short-term missions might fit into their professional life?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that excites me most about these trips going as a veterinarian now, is to be able to teach and mentor the students, and to see students come on these trips that may have never had exposure to a missions trip before, or to, a different community, and just see them watch God work, and just watch them blossom on the trips. They first come and, you tell them, hey, you should pray with that person before they leave, because they're sitting down in anesthesia recovery. So it's the perfect spot to do it. And they're reluctant at first, but then you get a couple days into it and they are initiating, talking with people, initiating prayer. And it's amazing to see the students blossom and grow in such a very short period of time. And for me, it's been so important in my everyday life as a veterinarian, just to have that perspective that veterinary medicine is not just a job. I'm a Christian, and God has gifted me this opportunity to use veterinary medicine as a platform for the gospel, whether that's in Waterford, Pennsylvania, or whether that's in Navajo. And for students to kind of be able to experience that and see that, and just realize that veterinary medicine doesn't have to be the job that they go to make a living, to go home and sleep at night, but there's something so much more important than that.
It really is. And, in my own life, it was challenging just to learn how those two different aspects, two very important aspects of my life, how those intersect and how they work together. And so I can appreciate that. I appreciate maybe the team leaders that kind of instilled that and helped you find your way. And then also, as time has moved on, how you've grown into that role, and now you're doing that for others. And that's an important part. I think as veterinarians, we can sometimes get a little bit isolated, and being able to work as teams and mentor one another, I think really helps as we try navigating some of these more challenging things. So on these trips, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have? And again, it's probably different depending on the trip, but what are some of the bigger challenges on each of those 3 trips that you've mentioned so far?
And it's interesting, because I don't know that I've ever had a trip where I sit back and I say, that was a huge challenge, because it's really fun to just watch God work and everything come together. You think about some of logistics, and getting all those people together, and you think that it might be difficult to put all, 22 people in a van together and they all get along for 2 weeks, but God just throws the team together, and to see each and every person's gifts come together, is just really, really cool to watch, the body of the church come together and become truly the hands and feet. As I've grown in my professional life, and, getting married and those types of things, I think my biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to balance enough time at home and, enough time on the missions field, just because it's something that I really, really enjoy. But I also know that God has put me into a different part of my life. And so also making sure that I am tending to that with the same passion that I tend to my veterinary medicine and my missions with that.
That act of continually trying to find that place of balance is always tough, and it changes in every season of our life. And so we can sometimes think that missions is this can be so foreign and so different, and so but it really is an awful lot like regular life. If you're not flexible, you're going to get run over. And so you have to be a little bit flexible. You have to be willing to step out of yourself a few times, maybe be uncomfortable from time to time. Over the last however many years it's been since you've been going on these trips, are there some moments that really stand out as being just some really wow God kind of moments?
Yeah, I think the Alaska trips, they're really easy to see on, because we'll plan to go to a specific village. Before we leave, we have our set, 3 to 5 villages that we say, hey, that's where we think we should go. And we get there and it's snowing, or there's freezing fog, or there's no planes to go in that direction. And God plops you in villages that you had no intention of going to. They might have more access to veterinary care, so they're, way down on our list as, options. And God plants you in a village, and you just see why God has you there. Whether it's struggles within the village, people that you come across that you realize needed a lot of support, and you're really just there to encourage them. The last Alaska trip, we ended up working with a lot of the police forces in each of the individual villages, which we don't always do. And just looking back on it, we all said, God put us there to be an encouragement to them. So it's just neat to watch God work and the people that he puts on the teams. Some of our different trips, we do devotions on every trip, and everybody's required to tell their testimony. And I remember one trip as a student, everybody's testimony was a complete sob story, whether it was childhood trauma. One girl, her mom had just died that summer. It was a whole bunch of different things, but God put that group together to help those students realize they're not on their own. They're with a whole bunch of other Christians that are struggling through the same things. So it's just, each trip is unique, and each trip I feel like I have a huge God moment. You just look back and you say, God did that, and we couldn't have done it any better if we tried.
So what you're telling me that that God's willing to use broken people? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, all the time, because that's me.
Well, and that's the thing, because when I think about missions, and I think about all of the excuses that we come up with not to engage, part of that, we think that sometimes we have to have all the answers, we have to have everything together, and yet God's working in your life just as much as he's going to work through your life. And that's an important thing. It's an important thing to remember. Even for, I used to run into this all the time, traveling around to different CE conferences. People would always ask, but I'm just I'm a small animal practitioner, and isn't missions all about, delivering calves or whatever it is? And I'm like, no, there's a lot of stuff. So if you, as a team leader, and maybe talking to some folks in the audience who have not necessarily thought about missions in this way, or maybe have had some of their own excuses, what kind of advice would you give to people as they might start thinking about short-term missions?
My advice would just to be completely open, and be praying about it, be searching the scriptures, be talking with, other veterinarians, other Christians, and just be open to where God is leading. Most people think missions should be across the world, and sometimes it's right here in our backyard. But sometimes, for me, it ended up being in the backyard, but for other people, it's across the world. So, just to be completely open and listening to God, and, Satan's going to try and throw so many roadblocks in the way. And don't let yourself just come up with excuses, but look for ways where God truly is closing the door or not. And I know in my own life, as I graduated veterinary school, started working, the first year or two, I kept praying. I was like, God, do you want me to just keep doing short term, or am I supposed to go long term? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I really enjoy this, but I also enjoy where I am. And I kept hearing God say, no, stay, keep doing what you're doing. And it's just been really neat to see. Since then I've met my husband and we've gotten married, and I've still been able to participate in these trips, and I've been able to mentor students, and I've been able to have students, come up here, with where I work, and to have externships and all of those types of things. So, it's just really neat to see how God uses you where you are. And he sets up ministry wherever you are. Just be open to him.
It's almost like he knows what he's doing. Is
Exactly.
that what you're saying? Well, and that's the thing, one of the things that I do appreciate about CVM and the way that they approach this is that the short-term department is always talking about developing and cultivating a long-term vision through short-term missions. And yes, there are times and places where we can go in for a very short period of time and provide some relief, provide some opportunities that are emerging or on an emergency basis. But then we also have this long-term need within communities all around this world. And it is possible, as we partner with local partners, like you said, with local churches and other organizations, we can come in and provide, even on a short-term basis, the types of of things that might help further their reach into a community, provide some things, provide opportunity for more relationships, and going back year after year, it just kind of cultivates that. And it's nice to think that even as a small animal practitioner in the middle of the United States, that that opportunity is right maybe outside your back door, but you do have to be open for it. So if someone was interested in short-term missions, how would they, what's the best way to maybe sort out how to find a place to go, maybe?
Yeah, so on the CVM website, they've got all of the short-term places listed, and like I said, as you're praying and thinking over all of those things, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as, hey, what weekend do I have available to be able to do something, and find what's on that weekend and say, okay, God, is this your will, and should I try it? So the important thing to remember also is it's not necessarily specific as to what location you're going. God is not going to use you only if you go to the correct location that he told you to go to. So be looking into those opportunities, be looking into opportunities that provide you opportunities to use the gifts that God has given you. If you're small animal, you may want to look for small animal trips, or you may want to say, hey, I want to see God work in the large animal too. So be looking for that. But I know for me, coming out of school, my passion was large animals. So I was going to do all large animal in practice, but then I realized I was asking time off for missions. So I was like, I guess I should do some small animal in practice too. So that way I'm, up to date on everything. But God will use you wherever that location is. So sometimes it's as simple as, what weekend do I have free, and what's an option?
It's all about being available. So, and I appreciate you being available today to chat with me about this. And I know that there are probably some folks that are listening that are right now, it's spinning around their head. God may be poking at them a little bit, thinking maybe this is something that I need to look into. And so I would, if you're one of those people, I'd encourage you to go to www.cvm.org, check out the opportunities on the short-term mission page. There may be something that God has for you. And hopefully, as you've been listening to Ginger's story, as you've been listening to the impact that God has been making, not just through her, but through that long-term service, through short-term missions that CVM has been engaged with for so very long. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight in how we as veterinary professionals can walk out our faith. And as we do, we learn how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you were blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.